Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of The Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You. And today we have a great show because we're going to talk about a few topics that you probably don't hear accountants talk about a lot. We're going to be talking about the economy. We're going to be talking about earnings season. And it is political season, so it's campaigning and elections are coming up. We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about a trend that we're seeing in the accounting industry and how all of that impact business owners and the stuff that your accountant probably should be talking to you about, but may not be. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let's just jump into the show. Welcome back, Lola.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You. We are on episode 20. Okay.
Oh, wow.
This is a pretty big, okay. In the grand scheme of things, we've done over 500 episodes across different shows. So in the grand scheme of things, this isn't probably like a big deal, but in the Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You, this is a pretty big milestone. And so I feel like we need like applause right at this point because we are on episode 20. And, you know, they talk about how, what is it? What's like the number of episodes where they say like people do podcasts and they get to like 7 and then like they quit? What's that number?
I've heard it's like 8
Is it 12?
sometimes,
Yeah.
and sometimes I've heard a little bit more, but somewhere around,
The
let's
point
say,
is,
10 plus.
yeah. So the point is, we're at 20. We're growing strong. We're super excited about like the content that's going to be coming to you guys. And yeah, this show is going to continue to be amazing. Okay, so Terrell, what are we talking about today? I'm excited about today's topics. There was a lot going on. It's like the end of the year. It's almost, well, towards the end of the year. It's almost Christmas, it's almost Thanksgiving. So like there's a lot that's happening. So I'm just excited to kind of like dive into it and talk about how it relates back to the business owner.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to your point of what one thing I'll say, what you just said is as far as when it comes down to the shows and stuff like that, I mean, we do a lot of shows. There's a lot of stuff that we got going on. And
Yeah.
the good thing about it is we create different shows for different audiences. So some of you that may be listening to this one, the stuff your accountant isn't telling you, you may be thinking like, oh, just 20. But like I said, there are other shows we do, like the Business Talk Library, where we interview entrepreneurs and business owners. You have the Law and Finance, where that's focused on the legal industry. We've done like the Finance and Accounting Show, where we interview other accountants and other firm owners. We've done the Food and Finance, where we're looking at food related entrepreneurs. And there's Charlando Negocios, which is done in Spanish. And then there was the Business Talk Library Careers, which is about navigating your career. So there's a ton of stuff that we're doing, ton of industries. So I will say is go over to the businesstalklibrary.com. You can check out all of the different shows there. Now, to today's topic, because I think this one is an important one. And I think a lot of times accountants tend to kind of hesitate from talking about some of these things because they don't want to come off as biased. And to be honest with you, I really don't care about that.
What I care that phase in this show. At this point,
because for me is what I care more about is helping business owners and even other accountants realize that you can talk about these topics without sounding politically biased or biased to a certain angle, because at the end of the day, all of this comes down to the simple thing of, as business owners and even as accountants who support business owners, we need to be able to look at the situation not for what we want it to be, but look at the situation for what it is, and then ask ourselves, how does this impact the decisions that we need to make moving forward? Because it would be great. I would say, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I want to just add to that to say that, like, regardless of whatever political party you belong to, the decisions that are made all have the same impact regardless of your political affiliation, right? Like, it all impacts the business owner. So really when it comes down to it, like Terrell was saying, like you assess the decision that's being made. You can have your own opinion about why it was done or why what's being done or who's being elected or why they're being elected. But at the end of the day, what you need to understand is like all comes back to how does that impact your business as a business owner? And I don't care what party you are, the impact is going to be the same because we're all in the same economy. And at the end of the day, this information we're sharing applies to you regardless of what your beliefs are. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it's one of those things that I think is the I could say the complexity that we all live through is that as a business owner, you have to live in the reality of the situation that comes your way. And
mhm.
you got to figure out how are we going to navigate it. We can't change it based on our ideological preferences. We just got to live through the reality of it. So, one of the things that I wanted to start the conversation off with was the earnings season. So, for those that aren't familiar, what earnings season is pretty much when a lot of your publicly traded companies are reporting their quarterly earnings. So, per the SEC, every publicly traded, if you're traded on the stock market in the US, you have to do these quarterly updates, whether it's release an annual report, do news press releases, or to actually hold a earnings call where the senior leaders get on, give an update about the business, and answer some questions from mostly Wall Street analysts. And that one's big for me because I used to work in investor relation for a pretty big Fortune 500 company. And one of the things that it made me realize in working in that, because I had to help the CEO and the CFO prepare for those, is that there's a lot of great insight and wisdom for medium and small size businesses if you know how to approach those conversations. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of business owners hear about earnings season, they're like, "Oh, I'm not publicly traded," and they ignore it. And I'm like, there's a lot of opportunity and a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
insight you can gain by listening to those. So you've
Oh yeah.
listened to you've heard a few.
I just
What
came
were
off
some
one.
of the what were some of the topics that were discussed, or some of the potential things that could impact business moving forward?
Yeah, I will say more recently, based on a couple of the earnings calls that I've heard, I think a couple of things that I would say that are important is supply chain. I mean, that's still an issue. That continues to be a challenge for not just for manufacturing companies, but if you think about the trickle effects, like we've talked about, we've done several content that has addressed like supply chain impacts and the key relationships that you need as a business owner. Because at the end of the day, someone's thinking, well, I don't know, I sell services. Like, how does a supply chain disruption impact my business? But at the end of the day, especially if you're doing B2B, like that's going to be an impact. So supply chain is one. The second one that's been talked about has been just the nice to have, which is one I want to focus on. And basically, a lot of companies are saying, hey, we're seeing that our consumers are really kind of the demand is changing, right? And basically, what that means is like people like to use a fancy word of like, a, the pipeline is shrinking or whatever. But basically, what it means is just at the end of the day, people are spending money on the things that they consider to be essential. People are spending money on the things that they consider are important to help continue to drive their business. And so, what that means is if you have a portfolio or products that are maybe more so leisure products or more so like a combination of both, is does your customer consider your product to be essential when it comes to them reviewing it? So those are some of the things I've seen. Just overall, it's just supply chain continues to be an issue. It's improved significantly, of course. I think the situation with Russia and the continued war between Ukraine continues to be a subject matter. It continues to be a topic just because of oil prices and hey, how does that impact, the supply flow? So overall, I'd say two key things across the board: supply chain and just the fact that people's demand pattern is changing. Like what people want is changing, and you have to learn how to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting one. I did a short, or I guess a video short for YouTube, or actually I'm not sure where you guys aired it. Marketing team. the marketing team for
This is what
the
happens
Business
when you
Talk
don't do the
Library.
marketing. But
The
it's okay
marketing
because that's
team,
not your job.
I will say the marketing team for the Business Talk Library and TL Turner Group are amazing. A lot of times I just create content and they air it
That's it.
somewhere. But I did a
That's it.
short about because one of the interesting things that I saw and that I've learned to pay attention to is
Mhm.
when sales at retailers as a whole in the industry starts to go down, but sales at Dollar General or sales at Family Dollar or sales at Walmart increase while the industry is
Mhm.
going down, that is usually a trend that, hey, people are deciding to make trade-off decisions where they're like, hey,
Yep.
we're not spending, at the normal stores we would usually buy it. We're looking
Yeah.
for better deals, which
Yeah.
tends to be a sign of like consumer behavior. Like people are looking for better deals. And I think where that impacts, for business owners, like let's say if you're a service-oriented business, depending on who your customer base is, people may be a little more price sensitive. Like, in all transparency, we've had some, some potential deals, contracts with vendors, some potential clients, and that decided to go with a different firm because pricing what they were very sensitive to pricing based on what was going on. And this wasn't like,
Mhm.
hey, really small business. I mean, this was like an $8 million a year revenue business that
Yeah.
was still very price sensitive. So they chose to go with a different accountant. Now, they still want to work with us on a project basis, but for some of the ongoing stuff, they chose to go with a different accountant. So I think if you're running a business, or even if you're an accountant and you support business owners, it may be good to really have a conversation with the business or the business leaders of like, hey, how price sensitive are our customers? Because if you have customers that are very price sensitive, when we go through economic challenges, like your business could be more impacted than you realize. And not necessarily because you directly have supply chain issues, but your customers have price sensitivity, which means they could be, your business could be one of the ones that they're debating about, well, do I keep this or do I not keep this? So
Yeah, and another thing I want to add in there when it comes to price sensitivity that I think is important is a lot of times being business owners, sometimes when we see market trends, specifically, I'll speak for myself. When you see a market trend, it's easy for you to just especially on the marketing side, for you to just take a blanket statement and just apply it across the board. But one of the things that I've realized is that, for example, if I take sensitivity on pricing, you need to be cognizant of what services or what products you have in your portfolio. And by that, I mean, you might have products that are high or services that are higher priced. And that was actually a short that you've done, Terrell, about being able to diversify your offering of like the products and the services that you're offering, because you might need to offer a lower priced product for a certain niche or a certain group of people that may be in a certain price at a certain price point or a certain revenue point that may not be able to afford the higher end products. And basically, what that allows you to do is create a product portfolio where you're not losing the business. And of course, this is something that we've had to learn as we've gone through the business deal is, hey, not everyone can afford to pay top of the line prices. Not everyone's doing $10 million in revenue. So I think that's very important, where when people talk about price point and just sensitivity and pricing, it's easy for you to just be like, man, like I need to reduce all my prices. Nah, it might be a good opportunity for you to evaluate, do I need to offer a lower priced product that still adds value to the customer or adds value to this person that I'm trying to serve, but still is at the price point that they need and is not costing me or taking too much away from me to where I still have a reasonable margin. And I think sometimes it's easy for you to just focus on reducing your price just across the board instead of kind of diversifying what you're offering to your customer, because at the end of the day you can still secure that business. It may just not be at the initial price, and it may just not be the original offering that you had for the higher price. So I think
yeah,
that's
I
important.
agree. I mean, I talk to a lot of accounting firms, and sometimes I get people give me feedback on like, oh, my prices are firm, my prices are fixed, and I don't do anything for less than X amount of dollars. And and I do understand where people are coming from that.
Yeah.
As the as the CEO of the TL Turner Group, one of the things that I think about is that all of our prices are negotiable. But what I do also want you to realize is so is the service of what you're getting for that
Exactly.
price.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you're not going to
That's
get the
exactly it.
same price. I mean, you're not going to get the same level of service for
Right.
a lower price. Like
Yep.
if some of our clients need we need to adjust on the pricing, well, also we're going to adjust on the delivery of the service as well.
Right. Yeah.
Now within reason, there's certain levels that we know what our floor is, to where we're like, hey, we're just not going, we can't support below this number. And so I think as business owners, as we navigate like these times, like I said, when you listen to a lot of the earnings calls, they're going to talk about supply chain, they're talking about price sensitivity, they're talking about inflation, they're talking about how the economy is impacting consumer behavior. As
Hmm.
business owners, we can be pretty agile in knowing that, hey, our prices we can have some agility in our prices, but do understand that does not mean that you are going to get the top level. Like there are some clients who may pay us $5,000 a month. You're not going to
Hmm.
get that level of service if you're paying $800 a month. Like,
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. Sorry, were you going to make a point? I
no,
want to
go
make
ahead.
sure I didn't cut you off. Okay. The one thing that I thought about when you were talking about you're not going to get the same level of quality is when we first started the business. I remember we kind of took the approach of the pricing, like just okay, fine, this person's just starting out, like let's negotiate, have the price lower, but the expectations were not adjusted. You know what I mean? So I think some people still came with the expectation. I'm like, no, you are not going to get C-suite service paying $200 a month. Like, just as an example, like, you're not going to get that. That's just the reality of the situation. And so I think really some people say, well, I'm not going to price below this. But in reality, it's like, no, you just need to kind of establish your standards and say, hey, this is what you get for this price. And if you want more, you can get it for X price, right? So I think really is just like once we set our standards, it made the conversation a lot easier. And I think it also made it very easy to navigate. The other point I wanted to make that I thought about when you were talking about the earnings was one of the things that I've actually heard mentioned on a lot of these like Fortune 500 company calls is price increases. So, like, they're looking at orders that have been placed by customers already and actually saying, hey, we're seeing inflation, we're dealing with higher costs, we have to pay our employees more, we have to do like an adjustable living wage adjustment or whatever. So, we're going to have to increase the backlog for orders that you already placed. And those are tough conversations to have. And so, one of the things that I thought about, and when you were talking, Terrell, I'm like, it's great to reduce prices and it's great to offer a diverse portfolio to your clients. But one of the things you also have to think about is for some products and for some services, you are going to have to increase prices. And how do you navigate those conversations, especially like in a situation like you said, Terrell, of like price sensitivity? Like, and I think that kind of goes maybe into the next point because if a customer finds your product or service valuable, they may be willing, they're likely going to be willing to pay more for that because they know that they're getting some sort of value from what you're offering. And I think that was kind of the second point that I've heard made a lot is we're seeing softer demand on some of the products that people don't consider to be essential. And I think really when it comes to price increases is your product, considered essential, or is your product valuable enough to the customer to be willing to pay a premium?
Absolutely. And I would say, for our business owners that are listening, one of the big things to keep in mind, I think, is, as you're talking with an accountant, is they may tell you, hey, here's what the price is for a service. Is do understand that there are a lot of firms that may say, hey, our prices are firm, but even from some of the biggest companies, like
Oh yeah.
I remember being working as a director of finance for a tech company, and we were hiring one of the big four. And even in that conversation, the price was negotiable even with a big four company. And I talked to a lot of accounting firm owners of smaller, from solo shops to, 100 employees. And even in my off-camera conversations with them, on their
Mhm.
website, their price may be X. But a lot of times when I talk to them, they have clients that are at various price points to where it's just like, I haven't found one firm that has been, hey, here's what our prices are. We have no flexibility. Most of the time, if you're a business owner, you're working with a client, or you're trying to find an accountant, there is some flexibility in their pricing. Now, at the same
Mhm.
time, you have to be willing to know that there's going to be some flexibility on what they deliver to you. And to
Yeah.
be honest with you, some of the offerings that we have, like for clients, that, hey, here's the general things that, when we survey a lot of business owners need. Some of the times we have conversations with clients and they're like, well, we don't need this piece, we don't need this piece, we
Mhm.
don't need this
Mhm.
piece, which is
Mhm.
perfectly fine, because the service should be adjusted to delivering what you need value on, not
Right.
necessarily like, hey, here are the 15 things that we're going to give you. Well, we don't really give
Mhm.
that many things. Here are the 5 things that we're going to give you. It's more of, no, what do you need? What does your business need from us as a bookkeeping and CFO firm? And hey,
Right.
here's what it's going to cost for us to deliver that, because that's what you need. And you're not paying for features that you really don't need.
That's actually a really good point. And I think another thing that we've done well in our business, or that we've done in our business that I think has worked well, is, like you said, every package is kind of custom to what the client needs. And I think this isn't just in accounting. I think this is everything in general. What specifically service products. I think I've encountered situations where people have offered products or services to their clients and said, like, for us, for example, we've seen situations where initially when the business owner comes to us, they say, hey, this is the stage where I'm at, but we can tell that they're eager to grow, they're eager to invest. So some of the things that we've said is, okay, hey, we'll start here, we'll take out these things, and then as you grow, we'll start to add on these service offerings and eventually work our way back up to whatever the original pricing was, or even get above that as your revenue grows. And so I think that, you have to be sometimes be willing to work with your customers, especially if you can tell. Now, I'm going to caveat this because I think this is so important, especially if the you see that the business owner is like willing to grow and they're actually invested in this, because there are some crappy clients out there that are just, you know what, they'll be complaining, they're trying to get a discount, but it's not, you're not really seeing the desire and the effort on their end to like grow and to move the business forward. And so you're just like, all right, well, we're just going to be here for, for the next 5 years. So I think for me, it's all about, like, is your client willing to grow? Because then as they grow, what you support with grows, and then your revenue grows and you grow with them. But that's only in some cases. So like, just don't
Yeah.
like make it a, a blanket statement. But yeah.
No, I'll say this. I'll say this phrase, like, now. I'm not. I'll say I don't fully endorse it, but I understand where the phrase came from. Like, we work with a lot of law firms in our bookkeeping, and so I hear a lot of feedback from lawyers. And I was talking with a lawyer, and I've heard several lawyers say this. And this person, they run a law firm and they also serve as a judge.
Hmm.
And, I was asking them about that experience. And one of the things that they said is, they were like, what, being a lawyer and she was like, really, and being a judge, it really helped me understand that, what, people suck. And I'm just, and she was like, let me and she said, let me clarify that. It's not necessarily that like all people suck, but there are some people out there that, like, there are some people who really n- don't have good intentions. And so I do think that as an accounting firm, we're on the lookout for that. And as business owners, we're on the lookout for that. Is like, when you're doing business with different people, it's just like, you don't necessarily want to do business with people who suck as a customer. And
Yeah.
so, yes, while, you do want to have some flexibility in how you deliver value to your customers, you also do want to be on the lookout of, like, hey, if this person is a bad customer, like, it's okay to let them go. And one of the ways that we tend to I tend to approach that when working with clients, like, I had a client that, they needed some adjusted pricing for, some of the services. And I'm like, okay, all right, we can adjust. Here's what we can offer. And they were sending in a lot of requests. And so I just reply back like, hey, here are the list of projects that you have asked for. Here are the ones that we have done. Here's what you're asking us additional stuff to do. Which one of these do you want to move up the priority list? Because you're not going to get all of them right now. Like, we can space these things out based on the pricing, because I'm not going to have our entire team focus solely on your project, especially when you aren't paying, the top tier price. You aren't paying for us to spend all day on your work.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, you need to help us like prioritize which projects matter the most to you, and then we'll take it from there. And so I do think that as a business owner, you can, as Lola said, you can have some very clear conversations with your clients. And then sometimes you do come to a conclusion of realizing that, hey, you know what? This client isn't worth the effort. Like,
Listen.
if we get rid of this client, we can go find,
Yeah.
4 other clients that may not pay as much individually, but those 4 clients could be better to work with. And the collective price of those 4 clients could be more than what you're getting from this one, medium size or larger client.
I agree. And I think also, like, I really think that customer chemistry is real. If you sell products, you don't have to care about seeing these people. You just sell your product, you market it, and you're done. But if you have to work with this person every day, or you get an email from them and you're just like, man, oh gosh, okay, what do they want now? Listen, the chemistry isn't really there. So for me, I'm just saying, I think you can usually tell pretty quickly. And sometimes, like, the tendency is just like, okay, well, this is a professional relationship, and like, I'll just, I'll just keep managing the relationship or doing whatever it is that they want to do. Like you said, Terrell, like, sometimes when the requests don't really match what the person is paying. And at the end of the day, like, listen to your gut. Like, if the chemistry isn't there with the customer and it's not working, and you're just like, okay, it is so much, your piece is so important and valuable as a business owner that it is not worth it navigating the situation that is just awkward and toxic. And I think, like, this is actually something we've also heard when people talk about their accountants. Some people talk about their accountants about, like, whenever they have to talk to their accountants, like, they're dreading the conversation because it's just like, it's not a productive conversation. It hasn't been helpful. And so, like, all of that to say, that is not the way a business relationship should be. And you said something really important, Terrell, I think on one of the shorts, that basically said you should not have to have uneasy relationships with people that you are paying money to for a service or a product. And so at the end of the day, it's like, if you're paying money for this and you dread talking to your accountant and you guys have a love-hate relationship, you can't stand the person, I'm like, so why are you continuing to have that relationship? And I think it applies the same for, like, a customer as well. Is it really worth your peace of mind?
Yeah, I mean, when you said that, it reminded me of this story with this person who had a very mean dog, and I just could not understand, like, where when they
You
would
say
go
dog?
feed the dog, yeah, like, the dog would, like, snap at them, like, they would go
Oh,
to try to feed the dog or pet the dog, and the dog would snap at them. And I asked them, I said, like, hold on, you're buying this dog's food, you're giving this dog a home, and you're, like,
dog
kind of
has an
afraid of
attitude.
your own dog. And I'm just like, why are you still doing this? Like, I'm just like, this isn't a relationship that you are obligated to keep. I mean, I'm just like, if either you need to, like, get some help to reestablish, like, the dynamics of this relationship with your dog,
Right.
but
Right.
or this dog needs to find a different home. And I
My
feel the
dog is a
same way when
bully.
it comes I feel the same way when it comes down to customers, where it's just like,
Right.
or to business owners, is if, dealing with your accountant is like, hey, I just want to see them twice a year. I just want to, like, just slide the check under the door and I want to run away. And I'm just like, wait, what? Like,
Oh my gosh. It
so it's like,
reminds me that reminds me of when I used to, in college, I used to go get my taxes done. And every now and then, like every year, we would find a new person. Now, I just want to preface by saying I was an accounting student. Like I had no idea about taxes. I hadn't even taken tax 101 or whatever that class was. And I remember we would like go to like this tax man, and like literally every year, I think I went to him twice. And after the second year, I'm like, nah, I'm not doing this. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not coming back to you. And I remember we would go, and every day you would just kind of sit there quietly. He'd be like, give me the papers. So it literally felt like you were going into some sort of like illegal deal. He would just sit there behind his computer. He'd be like, hand me the papers. So you hand him the papers. He'd look at them, answer, like you ask you 2 questions, and he'd be like, be ready in 1 week, and then like you leave. I'm just like, I don't want to have that awkward encounter. Like that was the only time I saw that man. I did not see that man anywhere else. I didn't even know if that man was tax certified. I just knew that he was doing my taxes. And I was a student in college. It cost $100. All the immigrant students went to him because they were like, oh, you get a good return or whatever. I have no idea what that man was doing. All that to say, though, you don't want to have that kind of relationship where like it's just awkward. You're just like, okay, just pass me the paper.
Statute of limitations on like
7 years.
audits?
Isn't it
Okay,
7 years? Yeah, I'm covered. I graduated from college 10 years ago, so I'm good.
I don't want the IRS coming back to us and being like, Mr. and Mrs. Turner, we found some discrepancies.
First of all, I wasn't making that much money. Like, so I don't think there was really much to find discrepancies with. I don't even know. I was probably making $20,000 a year. So even if they were to find a discrepancy at the most, maybe $20. But we're past the statute of limitations at this point.
Gotcha.
We should be okay.
Awesome. So how are you doing on time? Because I know you had to run soon.
Yeah, I'm good on time. We can.
Okay. All right. So I do want to move to. I do want to move to this next topic now. This is one that I think, like I said, a lot of people may get their feathers ruffled a little bit, and people may get a little upset. Maybe I should put a trigger warning. Well, I guess, hey, you've been warned. All right, we're gonna talk about politics. And not necessarily like which politicians are good ones. Like we're not gonna say here, like, hey, some of the popular debates, whether it's like, Stacey Abrams or the governor of Georgia or the libertarian candidate, or whether it's, John Fetterman or Dr. Oz or whatever. Like, we're not talking about like their political stances. What I do want to talk about is why many business owners should be paying attention to, some of these political races, and not so much just the political race, just the things that are being discussed. Because we are living at a time where, as many of us have seen from COVID, is government policies have a tremendous impact on the decisions that you make in your business. Like, during the time of COVID, where there were some states that decided to lock things down. There are some states that decided not to lock things down. There is a societal impact. There was an economic impact. There was an emotional impact. I mean, there's so many different implications of these decisions. And so one of the things that I tell business owners is, I'm not telling you to just, hey, make your political decisions solely based on your business. But I'm saying is, don't forget to think about that part, because you may like a person on a stance of, morality, and that may be perfectly fine. But one of the things I think that as a business owner, you have to also accept is like, hey, if this person wins, the person that I'm voting for, if this person wins, what is the, potential reality of the business environment that I'm going to have to navigate? And so I often tell people, and oftentimes when you talk about politics, people just assume that if you're talking about politics with business owners, they're like, oh, you should just vote Republican. And I'm like, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying you can vote for whoever you want to vote for. But one of the things that you can't do is just close your eyes to the economic impact of that decision. And I always tell people is, you can make whatever decision you want. Just make sure you have your eyes wide open about what that means in the other areas, and then just make the necessary decisions to move forward. So some of the big political topics that have been talked about are, taxes. That's probably the easiest one for business owners, to think about. And so, from when it comes down to taxes, and I always tell people is that is going to have an impact on businesses. Also, other things are like, what are going to be some political decisions that impact, let's say, supply chain, as far
Right.
as international relationships and stuff like that with other countries, or even regulations as far as what is the approval process for certain types of products. Like, one of the big things in that we're seeing is a lot of emphasis and energy leaning towards renewable energy sources, like trying to
Right.
encourage businesses to invest in renewable energy or sustainability as a whole. And so some of the things that I think, and you may hear this talked about in some of the earnings calls, is like, are there any business impacts that you've heard, Lola, that business owners probably should keep in mind? Like, hey, we should probably internally have a discussion about what could this mean for our decision making.
Yeah, I think the renewable and energy, sustainable energy is one that's being pushed a lot now. So I think as a business owner, you just need to understand, if we take it from a tax standpoint, there's probably going to start to be, if not already, a lot of incentives when it comes to, meeting certain standards, sustainability standards, renewable energy standards. So really, if your business, if you have, like, I don't know, an energy business, for example, or if you have a business like a manufacturing business, you really need to start to understand, how do we position our company to take advantage of some of those incentives, some of those tax credits that may come as a result of some of these environmental sustainable initiatives that are being made. And I will say, one of the things that I think is important to her when it comes to any sort of political decision that's being made is, you need to understand as a business owner what the political decisions at the local level are versus what some of the political topics are at the federal level, because all of that is going to vary. I think a lot of times people focus so much time on the federal level, and I understand why, because it tends to be covered very, more than some of the local topics. But in reality, if you're operating and you're based in a small town or in a city or whatever, my perspective and my view is, things at Washington move a lot slower. They're a lot more political, in my opinion, than a local ruling or local law. So a local ruling is like a municipality ruling, is more likely to impact your business quicker than a federal ruling, right? Because they got to go through all the process, they got to vote for it. Municipality rulings, a lot of times you have 3 people on the board, somebody comes up with the ruling, you have people show up to the town hall meeting, they make a decision, and it's implemented, right? So I think it's important as a business owner to really be up to speed on what's going on in your local community, because at the end of the day, like, for example, for us, we live in North Carolina and we live in the Pineville area, which is I guess this is a suburb or metro area of Charlotte. And one of the things that we've seen in recently is there's a lot of investments on small businesses, supporting small businesses, really updating the area, the city, the downtown area. And so what that means as a business owner is, hey, is it more attractive for you to consider opening a shop in that area where you have more incentives to operate as a small business? So I will say, I think there has been an emphasis on renewable energy, Terrell, but I think taxes has been a big one as well, of course. But I think, when it comes to navigating that as a business owner, you really need to focus on what are some of the things that are impacting you as a business owner locally before you look at the federal level. Because in my opinion, those things take time and are slow. And a lot of times, unless someone's putting in an executive order, it takes a while. People can talk, but a lot of that stuff may not even get implemented. So that's my view and my perspective on that.
Yeah. No, I think that is very true, because there are, I will say, the local level, I in total agreement with you. The local level is probably very overlooked for a lot of people. And it's one of those things
Mhm.
that I've thought about, at the Business Talk Library. And, that's, a maybe that may become a show that we do down the road, of politics and business, where we just really highlight what are some of the political decisions that are
Mhm.
having a direct impact on businesses. So maybe that'll be something that we release down the road. But I do think for a lot of business owners, is you want to pay attention to that. Is, you may love and support for example, you may love and support a candidate because of their stance when it comes down to abortion. And you may just be like, hey,
I
I'm
like
all
how you
for
pick
this
like the
client.
most I like how you pick like the most controversial topic. But okay, continue.
I mean, because, and I picked that one on purpose, because I think
I'm
there
sure
are a
you
lot of
did.
people. I think there are a lot of people who look at a politician and they're like, well, I'm going to pick my politician based on, or I'm going to pick my politician or my voting decision based on these social issues. And they never
Mm-hmm.
think about the other potential implications. And
Right.
so, one of those things that I think is the reality of when it comes down to politics, you're never going to find the perfect candidate to support.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
one of the things that I tell people, and I do this even myself, of just laying out what are my priorities and really asking myself, like, hey, which candidate really hits on, or do I align with my things that are my priority. Now, no one has ever been 100% on, because they're my priorities, not theirs. And
Right.
so no one's going to be 100% on. But then when I look and say, okay, all right, this person, we're in agreement on, let's say, 4 of the top priorities, but this one, we're not in alignment. So if I were to vote for that person and their ideas came forward, what do I need to do? What changes would I need to make to still be able to move forward in the area where we're not in alignment? And so I think a lot of people, probably, especially business owners, should take a step back to say, hey, if this is the person that I'm pushing for to vote for, it's just like, hey, there are going to be some things that they do and say that do not align with what your priorities are. The question you have to ask yourself then is, hey, if I support this person and they win, what am I going to
What
do
does that
about
mean?
the area where we don't have alignment? Like, what
Right.
action can I take? What adjustments can I, implement, or what tweaks can I make in my, whether it's my business or my personal life, to make progress? And what I have found is, a lot of times, if you're looking at a politician on a federal level, some of the times there are some things that you can do on a local level that will still protect that area where you don't have priority alignment with your federal official. And I think it
Mhm.
really just comes down to, as we talked about with earnings calls, it really just comes down to looking at the full picture of you running your business, and not just really just saying, like, hey, I'm going to make all my political decisions based on what they have to say about, marriage, or what they have to say about, abortion, or what they have to say about taxes. It's like, you have to take a step back. And I think as a business owner, you're learning that constantly. It's like, you got to be able to step out of the details and look at the full picture and say, what decisions do we need to make in light of the full picture?
And I was going to say, there's the last point on that is, if you do decide that you are just going to vote for this person based on the fundamental social belief or whatever it is that you believe, like, for example, their stance on immigration, that's all good and dandy. But you have to recognize and realize that there are going to be, like, you have to understand now that if this person gets elected, what does that mean for your business, right? So you can vote however you want, but just understand the consequences. And I think it's so funny because in having conversations with, I've seen stuff like on social media where people, have had gone ham for like hard for somebody getting elected, and then the person gets elected and they're like, dang, like, man, this is rough, like this is hard, like, you know like like people are losing their jobs, or like, hey, like there's been a lot of like migration of jobs overseas, just as an example. And like I guess I'll just give a realistic example because I don't care. Like one of my friends that I was talking to is a business owner, and he was like, man, like some of these rules that are being passed on the federal level, or some of the initiatives that are being passed on the federal level, are not really favoring a lot of the smaller business owners. There's a lot of incentives for the bigger business owners, which means that the smaller business owners are being pushed out. And one of the things that I thought about, or I was asking, I was like, okay, like, what did you expect though? Because like one of the things that this individual and this candidate pushed for was, bringing, basically supporting business, these larger businesses, or some of the initiatives that he pushed for were kind of going to lead you to this point, right? And so I think it's important that like you realize, like when you vote for somebody, like, hey, this is what it means for my business, and you just need to be prepared to live with the consequences, and adjust your business to make sure that um what is the new word that your business is, because now they're using this buzzword, recession proof your business, that your business is protected from whatever, or insulated from, the impact. But I by the way, I just want to say this is so off topic. I think that recession proof, or whatever the word, no, it's not recession proof. I'm trying to remember what the word that people have been using is. I just think it's a bunch of BS. I'm like, you cannot stop. I think it's counter inflation. I think that's what people have been using. I'm like, you cannot counter inflation. I'll tell you right now, you cannot. Inflation is purely like, it's a supply and demand issue. It's the way the economy moves. Like we specifically defined inflation in an episode we did. If you have questions, you can go back and watch it. But all that to say, before I completely digress my point, is I think you have to understand, for whatever political decision is being made, how does that impact my business? And just different things that are going on with the bigger companies are a great indication of kind of how you need to pivot your business to prepare for what's coming.
Absolutely. And I'll say, I'll to kind of wrap up all the things that we talked about. I mean, I'll end with this very, very short story. And it is like less than a couple minutes. I was driving home from work when I was living in the suburbs of Chicago. I was driving home from work. It was late at night, and it had snowed a little bit, and so there was a little bit of ice on the road. And I remember I was like the only car on the road. I was less than a mile away from home, and I'm coming around a curve, and at that curve, there's like an intersection where there are cars that are coming off the highway, and there was a stop sign for the cars coming off the highway. Well, there was a plow truck coming off the highway. The plow truck hit ice. In that moment, it's just like, I knew this plow truck is about to like really just destroy my car. And I'm driving, and it's like I could, and there's a median to my left. So it's not like I can just swerve to get out the way. And for me, it was in that moment, I just had to decide, okay, all right, what do you need to do? You know, this is going to happen. What do you need to do? Because you got a couple decisions you can make. You can swerve and try to, hit the wall, which could cause more damage to you and the car if you hit the wall, and the truck probably still will hit you. Or you can, brace yourself for the impact of it, or you can, relax and just kind of go with it. That way it limits the amount of muscle spasm or muscle issues you're going to have with this impact. And I think a lot of us are like that when it comes down to running a business, where we know something is coming. There is going to be some level of impact to your business.
Winter is coming.
And I think the best thing as business owners, what we can do is to assess our situation. And then I would also say is, if you are a business owner and you're working with an accountant, is to have an honest conversation with your accountant about, hey, based on the things that you see, what do you see coming? What are my options? And I'll be honest with you. In the moment of that car accident, or as that plow truck was coming to me, none of the options were good. None of the options were going to allow me to get out of it without a scratch, or without being impacted in some way. All of the options were bad. Like, all the options ended with, your car is probably going to be destroyed. You might get hurt. And so I think the same thing when it comes down to, your business, whereas as different economic impacts happen, your business is not gonna just, skate by with no scratches. There may be some dents, a little bit of bruises as you're kind of navigating it. But the best thing for you to do as a business owner is to really open your eyes, whether it's working with your accountant, working with your financial advisor, getting a better picture of what is going on, so I can put our business in the best position possible, so that whatever comes our way, we'll be able to, whether it's take the hit and keep moving, or we will be able to absorb the hit, or we will know how to navigate it moving forward. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I will say is, I did live through the accident. The car was totaled.
It was.
Yeah, the car was totaled. Drive shaft snap, doors snap, glass shattered everywhere. I did take the technique of just trying to relax as much as possible. My recovery took maybe about 3 days, and I was kind of back to normal. Now I did have to do some physical therapy, but I mean, for the most part, I was fine. I lived. The car did not make it through, but I made it through. So thanks for tuning in for today's episode. Until next time.